Doug Pierce, how are you doing?
All right. All right. Yourself?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all
Good.
right.
Good.
You know, Doug, we have a lot in common,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we've been friends for a long time. You were the best man in my wedding.
Right. Right.
We have a lot of history, and we spent a
Mm-hmm.
lot of time on the bandstand playing together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've played a lot of your music.
Mm-hmm.
You played in my band. You we met in Kalamazoo.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute, I think you lived with me for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's right. And we went to the
Right.
same. Go ahead.
Right. As I was starting my master's
That's
at
right.
Western. That's right.
That's right. And let's see what else here. We went to the same church, Christian
Yeah.
Life Center, in Kalamazoo.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
That's right. And when I left, you kind of took over some of the stuff that I was doing
Yeah. That's right.
at the
Mm-hmm.
church. I interviewed Pastor Brooks for this series. Actually, it was a
Yeah. I
really,
saw that. Yeah.
yeah, it was a really nostalgic
Mm-hmm.
interview. He's meant so much to
Yeah.
my development, and
Mhm. Same.
him being
Same
a
here.
musician. Yeah, yeah, and him being a
Yeah.
musician, I think made him like an ideal person to be my pastor. So that was
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
that was a
Definitely.
really cool thing.
Yeah.
And it makes me also miss just like being able to stretch out like that in church, because long services many times, especially those Wednesday night services where sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
only play and it
Yeah.
never got to the sermon,
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah, that's
because
right. Yeah,
so.
yeah.
And then you moved to Columbus, and
Hmm.
we were playing together in my fusion band, Infusion,
That's
and
right.
then what was the name of that? What was the Marquee Lounge?
Oh yeah, that's right. Over there. Oh man, that was yeah. In fact, it was almost like off of one of those like sort of industrial highways.
That's right. That's
That
right.
yeah, kind of
That's
a
right.
typical, very typical nightclub kind of setting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
We played out on the sort of covered patio
Yep,
that
that's
gig,
right.
man.
It's super
Man,
hot.
oh my goodness, those were some hot
Burn
gigs,
up.
some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh yeah.
it was formative time for me spent with you, man. I learned so much from you.
Oh, thank
Was
you, man. Same
so
here.
so influenced by your musicianship, your style, the your phrasing, your the bounce that's just in your music and your playing, and just the way that you craft your lines and where you put the angles,
Sure, sure.
all of that bebop, that stuff
Yeah,
was very influential to me, and still I can hear you, in my head.
sure.
You're, yeah,
Yeah.
um,
Well, that's like that. When you think of like those pairs of great cats, throughout the history of the music, like Max and Clifford, Max and Booker Little, even Miles and Train. It's just sort of like you get that sort of that those sort of pairings where you get these people that like to so they influence each other greatly, not
mhm,
just in terms of playing, but musically speaking, where you almost can't imagine the music without those pairings almost. And
yeah,
so, and I see that even in people that we know, like you and I, for instance, my wife comments about us playing together a lot. That she took a lot of notice to that over the years as well, and she still reminisces about a lot of the music that we've made together. And so, those pairings, I don't know. There's something about those types of pairings that are very important and have just I think influenced the music and created a certain type of lineage in the music that's very special. I think very special, and whether it's local pairings or internationally known and revered pairings. So, yeah.
Now, in addition to us playing a lot together, and you moved to Columbus, and we continued. It's like we never stopped. And then you started working at Ohio State, teaching
Mm-hmm.
trumpet and jazz arranging and composition. You were a tremendous asset to the program. And then since then, you moved to DC area, and then now you're working on a DMA in composition at remind me of the name of the school.
UNL, University of Nebraska Lincoln.
That's right. Well, it's a Big Ten school, so I'm not
Yep.
allowed to say the name of the school. I have to use now.
That's right. You know, they do that in the SEC too. In the SEC, they have that kind of stuff too, where it's just like, okay, yeah. But even though I'm here, I'm still like very proud of my associations with OSU, with Ohio, and I have to make the distinction because I found out there are two OSUs now. So there's Oklahoma State and Ohio State, and it's funny because we're kind of the state is situated kind of in between the two, slightly west and kind of in between the two, and so it's sort of like it's kind of interesting when I say. I remember making this mistake when I first got here, and people were asking me about my teaching experience. And I was like, "Yeah, I taught at OSU for 3 years," and they were like, "Oh, wow, how did you like Oklahoma?" And I was like, "No, Ohio State." And it was like, "Oh, that's right, I have to start to."
The real OSU, the real OSU.
Yeah.
So
I'm very proud of that time there at Ohio State, and it was a really good time. We also miss Columbus very dearly too, as well. And it's even though we spent a short amount of time there, it was one of those places that's very dear, near and dear to our heart. We just have a very special place in our heart for Columbus for sure. Yeah, even to this day.
We attended the same church, the St. Gregory of Nyssa, Eastern Orthodox Church.
Yep.
And
by the way, that's where we originated and confirmed at that church there. So again, like Columbus is very special to us.
Yes. Yeah, and in addition to music, you've been very influential in our conversations because we talk about a lot of different things, politics, religion. We both neither one of us were born Orthodox, but we both came into the Orthodox Church, and so. And I think politically, we tend to agree on a lot of things, and it's made for some interesting conversations. That whole iron sharpens iron, and I mean, we could go on like this for a long time, but I wanted to give the audience a kind of glimpse into our relationship and to kind of set the stage for our conversation a little bit. So, Doug, can you talk about how you grew up, and of course we grew up in the same state. That there is that too, but how you grew up and maybe what was going on in the household, the kind of music that you heard. Maybe some early mentors and teachers that you had, and when did you know that music was the thing, and how did that whole thing happen for you?
Yeah. So I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, And I'm really from Detroit. And I always say I'm really from Detroit because a lot of people sometimes from Detroit are from the metro area. So that's some of the surrounding suburbs. And so a lot of times, like Dearborn isn't really Detroit. It's close. You almost think of Dearborn, Michigan, almost like an inner city suburb, sort of like Highland Park, where I actually graduated high school at. But I really did live in Detroit. I grew up in the Gratiot area on the east side of Detroit. I lived there until I was about 8.5, going on 9, and then from there, one of my aunties, I moved down to Georgia with her and her husband, and I stayed there until I was about 15, and then I moved back in 10th grade. I stayed in Highland Park with my mom up until about 11th grade, and then I had a cousin that decided she'd like me to come and stay with her for at least for the remainder of my high school years, and so I spent the remainder of my high school years with my cousin, Sharonda, which made a real big impact on my development, even as a student, getting ready to graduate and go into college. When I graduated high school, I went straight to Michigan State University for 2 years. My wife and I were talking about this the other day, where the University of Michigan, it's funny because like we were talking about the whole rivalry between University of Michigan and Michigan State. And for me, I wasn't a hardcore fan of the schools, either one of the schools in that sense where I was really into the rival. For me, I just naturally leaned more towards Michigan State. They did what was called on-site admissions. I applied, and they gave me my acceptance letter before I left. At the end of the day, when we did a campus visit at Michigan State, and after that, I didn't apply anywhere else. I said I want to go here. This is where I want to go, and so I ultimately went to Michigan State and was there for a couple of years. I'm going to go back to my upbringing in Detroit because there's some interesting things that I should probably segue into to kind of get into where the music sort of comes from. So I wasn't a musician early on. I just was a regular kid in Detroit. I grew up in a pretty broken house. I had a mom that was hopelessly addicted to drugs, and during that time, I had a lot of family members that were in the city that would look out for me. And so between my auntie that lived in Georgia and later my cousin, who is a product of another auntie of mine who I was very close to, I was able to sort of find a little bit of peace away from the environment that my mom was in. I bear witness to a lot of negative stuff, which sort of influences the way that I sort of see the world, even even spiritually and through political eyes as well nowadays. It took a while to get there. It was a convoluted path to get there, but eventually I got there and where I am. And I still feel like I'm growing and still learning things. The music side of things was always there. I grew up listening to typical Black American music, from jazz to more popular styles, R&B, actual rhythm and blues, and what we know as modern R&B stuff, funk, soul, a lot of soul music. My aunts and uncles were big fans of various soul singers and later contemporary soul and R&B singers like Marvin Gaye and Otis Redding to James Ingram. We had all this stuff. Luther Vandross. We had all this stuff in the house, and I always was into. I was always into not just the singing, but also the instrumental stuff. So I would spend a lot of time listening to a lot of the instrumental stuff, and all the different changes, all the different like segues and just different parts of the music, from the intros to the outros to the vamps and things like that. And sometimes I would really annoy some of my family members because I would be playing a recording of something and I'd be just going back listening to this part. Oh, I gotta hear it again. And would you stop doing that before you break my tape? Break your face. I was like, okay, I'll, or make you a recording and then you can break your own tape. And so then I would do that and just, rewind, pause, play, and just trying to just get that sound in my head. And And when I moved to Georgia, I still wasn't a musician, but still around listening to a lot of music. My auntie Charlene is her name. Wonderful, wonderful woman. She was she's a veteran is it cosmetologist? Yeah, cosmetologist. She's a beautician. She does hair. She did hair for over 40 years, and but she was a big Luther Vandross fan. So all those classic Luther Vandross, like as in many people in the Black community talk about the skinny Luther, the fat Luther, the in between Luther. Yeah, we had music from all those periods. You know, at least up until I moved back to Detroit in the early '90s. So I heard all of that stuff, all those beautiful love songs, and you know, she was also into DeBarge as well, and so I got real hip to a lot of the DeBarge and Switch, the group Switch with all the siblings. So I got to know a lot of that music, got very familiar with a lot of that music. And come seventh grade, I most people were joining band in my middle school. People were joining band in the sixth grade. I waited for a year. And finally, I said, I can't take it anymore. I really want to learn how to play an instrument and really start learning how to play and really start learning about music a little bit more. And so but I said, let me make sure it's something that I want to do because I don't want my auntie fussing at me like I paid all this money and then you decide you want to do it for 2 weeks and you want to do something else. Because I did that with football. I actually wanted to join the football team, middle school football team, and I went and tried out, got on the team, and went to the first practice and took a hit. I just took a hit. We were just doing a drill, a hitting drill, and I took a hit, flattened out on my back, and I said, you know what? No, I'm straight. I love what you cats do, but I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna do this. So I was out.
You know something funny. Something funny about that is I had the same experience, except for it was Pee Wee football though. It was little league football, and I took a lick, and the guy got me like right in the solar plexus, and you know knocked the wind out of me, and then that's the last time I played any football.
Yeah. I was like, nah, I'm straight.
I'm straight.
I had those awful people that do play that sport because it's a physically demanding and brutal sport. It can be brutal at times. And after that, I didn't even finish practice. I just grabbed my star. I was like, Coach, I think I had it. He was like, okay, I understand. I went to the locker room, called my auntie, come pick me up. She was like, you didn't even make it to the end of the practice. I was like, nope. And after that, I didn't look back. But I always respected the football team. I respected what they did and everything. But we used to, because we were in the band program, we used to get free admittance to our home games. And I saw a marching band one night at one of our games, and I said, man, I just couldn't get over the performance I saw. And it wasn't like the greatest performance ever, but just the allure of watching them do a patterns in motion drill on the football field and playing music at the same time. There was just something very special about that, and I just couldn't get over it. Even hanging with my friends at the football game, I still was thinking about what I had just saw at the halftime show earlier that night. And so I went to my aunt's husband, my Uncle James, and I said, hey, Uncle James, I think I want to play an instrument. And he was like, well, what instrument do you think you want to play? And my mind is thinking saxophone, 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 saxophone. And I said trumpet. And he was like, oh yeah, I used to play the trumpet. That's a good instrument. And so I actually never really originally wanted to play the trumpet. I actually really wanted to play saxophone. I actually wanted to play all the woodwinds. I was really into flute and clarinet. I really loved the sound of those two instruments. We didn't have oboes, so I wasn't familiar with the sound of oboe yet. But flute, clarinet, I just love the sound of those instruments. And saxophone, there was just something about the saxophone that
I knew there was a reason why I liked you. now, all these years later, it comes out. Keep going, man.
And I always, this is, it's funny because even in my writing, when I'm writing for big band, I'm constantly thinking about. It's funny. I think about the trumpet section, of course, but as a trumpet player, I kind of know what to expect from the trumpet section, but I'm always musically thinking about the saxophone section, especially when it comes to doubles and the trombones for what it's worth. I'm always thinking
Hmm.
about the trombones, and because to me, um, I remember hearing someone tell me one time who wasn't a musician, a professional musician anyway. It was one of our office secretaries, and they were asked, we were talking about all the different, and I was telling them about the different instruments that I really dug and why I like their sound. And I said, I don't know why I like the trombone sound. I just really like the sound of the trombone. And she was like, yeah, because for some reason, it seems to mimic the human voice a lot. And,
Yeah.
and and I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. I thought that was really interesting. Um, Last year I took a performance. No, this year, this scholastic year, I took the performance practice course, and we were studying Haydn, uh, Haydn and his music, and the performance practice issues around his music. And he was one of the earlier composers that really, especially in his so-called sacred music, that added a lot of trombones to his music. And
Mm.
it was for that reason. It was because the trombone mimics they thought of the trombone as a holy instrument. It mimics the human voice a lot. And, and I actually think the same about saxophone. Even like when you think of like the tenor sax and the alto sax and its range, I feel that a lot of the really substantial richness that I can find in voice leading stuff, I also find it in the saxophones. Like there's a certain range that just really mimics the human voice, and it seems to be really nice. Even if I write in the higher register, in the high, there's some humanistic qualities I still hear in that, and so
There, there's an interesting thing about saxophone with
mhm.
respect to alto saxophone versus tenor saxophone.
I
So
remember you talking about this before, the interesting nature of especially the alto sax. I think you were saying it was a strange instrument,
yeah, yeah, I did a video called alt, alto saxophone is a weird axe or something.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And in that video, I contrasted a little bit
Uh-huh.
between alto and tenor, and about how,
Mhm.
you know, uh, the range of the alto is not really it's one of these instruments that a lot of folks start on, but they
Right.
sort of pass through it on the way to tenor. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
and the reason for that is that and reason why there are a lot more tenor players than alto players is because
Hmm.
tenor is closer to the average male's vocal range
Sure,
than the
sure,
alto
sure,
is, right? And
sure.
so I think it makes it a little less challenging to sort of identify with the sound of the instrument and sort of
Uh,
produce sounds that seem to be native to a person's body, because you have this
sure,
kind of psychosomatic connection with the
sure.
instrument, identifying with different parts of the instrument. You have
Hmm.
the neck of the saxophone, you have
Hmm.
the throat of the saxophone, you have the sort of
Hmm.
body and the lower, around the bend there and the bell, the
Yeah.
bottom of the horn, and so
Hmm.
there's this connection in,
Yeah.
most saxophone players are men, and most saxophone players have a vocal range that's kind of a tenor vocal range, and so
Sure,
that's
sure.
why tenor seems to well, people tend to fall into that. And there's
Sure.
this
That's why
history,
you do it. Sure.
yeah, and there's this history of it's like this process, very common thing where in years and years ago, 50 years ago, longer ago than that, the
Hmm.
the way that this worked is you started on clarinet, and then
Hmm.
after you played clarinet, I
Hmm.
was talking to Antoine Roney about this, Doug
Okay.
Lawrence,
Hmm.
J.D. Allen. We know
Uh-huh.
Coltrane. We know Coltrane did this. This is
Sure,
just the
sure,
common thing. Walt Weiskopf.
sure,
You
sure.
start on clarinet, then you play
Hmm.
alto, and
Wow.
then you switch to tenor. And that was
Wow.
exactly what
Wow.
Coltrane did. And it's interesting because it seems to, it makes a lot of sense as far as this sort of range that those instruments have. And as you go through puberty, as
Yeah,
you
the
know, as a
development of the
man,
actual.
and you
Yep.
start, and your voice starts to get lower and deeper,
Mm-hmm.
then
Mm-hmm.
moving to the tenor. Plus, obviously, the tenor is a bigger instrument. So, I didn't mean to get you
No,
off track or
no,
anything,
no, no,
but
not at all. One thing I wanted to ask about that now with because I thought about this for a few years after that particular video that you made, and I wondered what have you noticed like with your women students as their progression takes place as they're developing as woodwind players as a side. Do you find the same clarinet, alto, tenor progression, or does it go, you know, more of start on alto, kind of stay at alto, but maybe develop more range either on the upper end or lower end of the alto, or is it just
it,
kind of
it's interesting. I think I think you would probably find that maybe more women gravitate towards alto. I don't have any statistics on
sure,
this or
sure,
science. It's
yeah,
not a
yeah, yeah,
science based thing. It's just based on what I tend to see. But you know, there's
sure,
a lot
that
of
is true.
female tenor players.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
uh,
yeah, definitely.
and the other thing is that, I mean, I didn't start on clarinet. I started on alto. You know,
Okay, sure,
so it's
sure.
not necessarily that everyone follows that process, but it was a common process. And you know, I've seen it where, because of a school program not having any more altos and needing a
Mm-hmm.
tenor player, where students might actually start on tenor. It's not the usual thing, but you know,
Okay,
sometimes that happens. And yeah, so it's a kind of an interesting, it's kind of an interesting thing, but I think totally related to the speaking voice.
yeah, 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 definitely. And so, getting back to my childhood, like uh, after the one particular football game, I said, okay, you know what? Next week, I'm actually going to go in, and I'm going to see if I can get into the band program. And I went to the music band director, and I said, I would actually like to join band. Is there a possibility that I can do this? I did not start in beginning band, so I would probably I told him I understand I would probably have to sit in with the sixth graders and just learn to play, and and he kind of he basically just told me no. And at first I didn't, I was like, I'll wait and ask him again. And I went the next day and asked him again. And then finally I was like, look, I really want to be in band. I really want to learn how to play an instrument. What can you do? What can you do for me? And he just looked me straight in my face and was like, yeah, I don't really think you would have the mental capacity to really catch up to where you need to be as a student. And so I'm gonna say no, not at this time. And so that just completely crushed me. And but I was determined to get in band, and so I went home and told my uncle. And I don't know what he said to my band director, but I went and asked him again. He came, all I remember is sitting in social studies class. Someone was like, "Hey,
Woo!
hey, Doug, ain't that your Uncle James band?" And I just saw this blue Econoline 150 van leaving the campus, passing through the parking lot where our class was situated, and to take the exit out of school. And so I said, okay, you know what? I'm gonna give it another try. I'm gonna ask him again. And so I went there and asked him again, and he, annoyed, of course, was like, look, okay, here's what I'll do for you. You have 9 weeks. So we were on a quarter system. So every 9 weeks was a new quarter. So we had 2 quarters in the fall and then 2 quarters in the spring, winter and spring. And so we did a thing where he was like, I'll give you you got 9 weeks, from today to get your instrument, catch.
I trust that you've enjoyed the video so far. Please subscribe, comment, share, like, And also, you can go over to my Patreon. The link is in the description if you'd like to further support. Thank you. Now back to the video.
Your instrument, catch up with the rest of the sixth graders, and if you can do that, then you can stay in band for the rest of the year, and you'll be fine. If you can't do that, you can't stay in band, and you have to sit out until next year. You can start next year, but you have to wait until next year. And so I was like, okay, good. And so my aunt went to a place in Athens, Georgia, and got a trumpet for me. We were doing a little rent-to-own thing, so that if I decided to quit, she wouldn't feel so annoyed that I wasted time and money. And so I got my trumpet and started practicing. The night she brought it home, I took it out. Let me see if I can at least make a sound on it. Made a sound, and went to bed. And then after that, I just started working. Got my books and stuff, and started going through the books and just learning everything I could about the horn, exploring the horn, getting into trouble for taking it apart and not knowing and not taking it apart in order. So I was completely screwed. So I thought I broke the horn. You had to go back, take it back, and the guy was like, "Yeah, he just put the valves in wrong. That's all." So we had to, so we got that fixed. And so then after that, I knew how to deal with my valves. So when it's time to oil them and stuff like that, I knew how to take them out and put the oil on. So I was just kind of exploring the instrument, and within a couple of weeks, I actually had gone through our little method book that we were using in class, and I was really ready to play. And he wanted to put me in the 7th grade group, but I said I felt like I still needed some more time in the 6th grade beginning band. So I said I'm gonna at least finish out the quarter or the rest of the semester, and then I'll think about going to the 7th grade group. And so I finished out the quarter, and then I actually stayed with the beginning band until about midway through the spring, what we call the spring semester. And then finally I was like, okay, I'll do the concert with the 7th grade band. So I'll start learning that music. And so I ended up doing that. And after that, just never looked back, just kind of kept going and trying to kept progressing. We had these, it's funny because the next year, was it the next year? No, it was right before the end of 7th grade. We started learning about scales. And of course, we could play the 4 scales that we used in our warm-ups, and that's what we did. But I said there's some other scales in this book. I should probably just go ahead and learn them. So I went home, rushed home one day, got done with all my homework, and I said, okay, I'll learn all of these scales, all the major scales that were listed. I'm gonna just learn them, and I'm gonna work on them so I'll memorize them. And so I worked the rest of the day memorizing all the major scales, just getting them together. And so I actually would have more things to warm up with and feel like I'm ready to really play some music when we got to band class. And so I'm sitting in there and I'm playing like these scales and all these like what they call weird keys at the time. And and folks are like, what scale is that? It's like, oh yeah, man, this is the B major scale, or this is a C sharp major scale. Oh, this is the E major scale. And it's just like, but you know all of those? I was like, yeah, I just went home and practiced them. So, so I at least know what they are and stuff. And so that started that journey of putting that stuff together. And then I realized that there were more of them to learn. And so I just kind of eat it up and just keep learning them. And so then I just never looked back. By the time I moved back to Detroit, I knew, when I started, I knew that music would probably be a part of my adult life. I knew then I wanted to keep doing this. I didn't know if I wanted to be a band director. I didn't know if I wanted to do that, but I knew that I wanted to play music. I just didn't know what all the options were at the time. And I did have other aspirations. I wanted to go into the medical field. And then I realized how much schooling that would require. And so I said, maybe I'll do something else. And then,
Doug, you know, by the time you're done, you would have had about the same amount of schooling.
Yeah. I realize that now. I realize that now. Exactly. And in fact, And I might have had way more debt, but
Oh,
yeah,
right,
for
right,
sure,
right.
I would have
Of
been done
course.
about the same time, and and working in the field, made more money too, of course.
Right.
But but I said, do I really want to do that? And so then I decided, well, maybe I like electronics, so maybe I'll consider engineering. I don't want to be a tech, like an electronic technician. And I'm kind of glad that I decided against that, because those were uh, an electronic technician job, unless you become an electrician. Um, just doing maintenance on electronics is not really a job that much anymore. It's not, it comes with doing a lot of other things. Everything's so integrated now, and so just being an electronic tech now is not really something that you could really aspire to do. You'd be doing other things with that, and um, so I said, well, let's get into the design aspect of it, and so electrical engineering was something that I really thought about, that I really thought I would do all through high school. And even, in fact, when I entered Michigan State, I actually was not accepted in the music school first, because I didn't audition for the music school. I was actually an engineering major. And so I was by way of the School of Engineering. And 2 days before classes started. That Friday, excuse me, that Thursday and Friday, I said, you know what, I, I, the music bug is really there strong, and I think I really want to go after this. I was really unsure about it, but I said, I really think I should go after this. And so I went, and there were still open auditions, late auditions that were held at the School of Music. I went and took the audition, and I got in. I didn't need to choose a major yet, so I just got in as a music major. And then if they decided that the next day was my sort of the scholarship audition, and you could, hear the available scholarships that are actually left that you can audition for. And so at that time, I chose to do a performance audition for the area of composition. And so I ended up getting in as a theory and composition major, and that was my major for 2 years at Michigan State. And was there for a couple of years. I really enjoyed my time there. I did have some problems adjusting, because it was such a big school, and I had to get very used to being around completely people that I just didn't completely know, and get to know them. And while I'm adjusting to this workload that I wasn't used to, and living away from home, and unfamiliar surroundings and things like that. And so I did struggle adjusting, at least for the first semester, and then the second semester was fine. But I stayed there for a couple of years, and then I ended up uh, uh, leaving for a period of time. I left for a period of time, and then I just kind of worked for a couple of years. I did a couple of cruise ship gigs, came out of those, and then I decided, you know what, I think I want to move to New York, and but I don't know if I can handle trying to get a job and living and bearing the cost of living in New York. And so I had a good friend of mine that I knew from when I was living in Georgia. He had gotten married and moved to the Washington, D.C. area. In fact, he lived right in Northwest D.C. He lived off of Georgia Avenue, which is one of the main streets that basically goes all the way from the National Mall, all the way up and out to the, uh, the neighboring county at that time on the northwest side of D.C. is called Montgomery County. Passes through Silver Spring. It goes all the way out to, and in fact, if you keep going up Georgia Avenue, if I'm not mistaken, you can end up in Frederick, Maryland. But it goes all the way out to like Montgomery County, where we lived before we moved here, which in Montgomery County, which is called the Shady Grove area. There's two major streets, Wisconsin Avenue and Georgia Avenue, that runs directly into both of those sort of Maryland suburban areas there. And so I moved out there. I actually auditioned for Howard University, which is one of the big HBCUs in the area between DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And but there was also a smaller school across town that had a local legend that was running the jazz studies program. Because at that point, when I left, Michigan State did not have a jazz studies program, so I wanted to study jazz really seriously at that point. And so I was going to go to Howard's jazz program, but then I met Professor Calvin Jones over at the University of the District of Columbia, and it was there that I decided I would like to have this person be a mentor of mine, and so I decided to go to UDC, and so I went there and finished out. And in May of '99, I finished my bachelor's and stayed for about a year. I taught in the DC area and was going back and forth to New York a lot and just kind of playing and just trying to get to know musicians and things in the New York area. And eventually I was going to try to make New York a home, but didn't do that. I ended up getting married and moving back to Michigan for a period of time. I was in Battle Creek for a little while. Things didn't work out so well, and so I decided that, hey, if I leave Michigan before I leave Michigan again, let's at least consider a graduate degree. And and it's funny because during that time, I met you, and we got to know each other really well, and we had that conversation. And there's another gentleman that lives in New York that actually used to go to UDC before I went there by the name of Bruce Williams. Do you know Bruce Williams? Alto player?
I'm not sure. Sounds familiar, but I'm not sure.
Good cat, played with a lot of cats. He and Antoine know each other really well. They've sort of played in a lot of the same circles together and stuff out in the New York scene. And he was saying a lot of the same things. Both of you were actually saying a lot of the same things to me about considering, hey, you should just get that graduate degree. He was like, I wouldn't move to New York right now. So if you got an opportunity to get a degree, go ahead and take it. And I was like, you know what, man, I'm gonna really consider that. And ultimately I did. And it was one of the better decisions that I made, since deciding to move to DC. And I'm very glad I did, because at that time, Western was going through a little bit of a shift. They had brought in Dr. Cowan, so he was brand new, and he turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful teacher, mentor as well. And so, in fact, to the point where I wanted to spend another year with him. And so I actually, instead of doing it in 2 years, I did it in 3 years. And so I was there from 02 to 05. And then from there, from there, the fall of 05 is when I came down to Columbus, and we were, and we started getting to work together at Ohio State. And was there with you guys during the time, another mentor to both of us at the time, Dr. McDaniel, Dr. William T. McDaniel, sitting up
I interviewed him.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
That was a good interview.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So let's back up a little bit. So when did you know that you had perfect pitch?
Oh gosh. So the funny story about that, I found out my sophomore year in high school. So I had so my musical life is actually filled with a lot of really good mentors. And at this particular time, our main band director, he had this I think he had like a hammer toe thing happening with his feet, so he had to get a major foot surgery. So that was going to put him out of school for a couple of months while that surgery healed. And during that time, there was a gentleman who had just graduated with his master's from Northwestern, a great clarinet player, and I cannot remember his name. Was it Leahy, Mr. Leahy or something like that? But anyway, like Patrick Leahy, I think his name was. But he was playing in the Chicago Symphony Civic Orchestra. He was hanging around, hoping that an audition would come up for a utility chair in the Chicago Symphony. That's what he was actually waiting on. I don't think he ultimately got the chair, but he was really an incredible clarinetist, and very fascinating because he was so good, and you know, he had all these beautiful, you know, handmade clarinets that he would bring and practice on all the time every day while he worked with our band. And while he was there, I remember one day he was practicing, and he played this. He's playing some sonata, and I was like, wow, that's a really beautiful line. Play that again when you end up on the E flat there. And he was like, wait a minute, how do you know that that was E flat? Because I was like, I had my back turned. I was getting something out of the cabinets and checking some of the instruments. I was helping him with, you know, with some of the storage, the instrument storage. And I think they were preparing to clean some of the instruments up for next year. And he was like, well, how did you know that was an E flat? And he was like, I just, you know, I just know what the notes sound like. I hear them, I know what they sound like. And he was like, you know what that's called? And I was like, no, I don't. You know, I just assumed that everybody could do that. So, you know, that was really my thought on that. I didn't think it was anything special at all. I just thought that it was something that everyone could do. You know, at that time I was writing arrangements, and so we didn't own a piano, so I would just write the arrangement. And I just figured, like, people that wrote music, that's what they did. They just wrote music. They didn't, you know, they knew what it sounded like in their head, and they just wrote it out. And so all they had to know was like how to transpose for the instruments. And once they knew how to transpose for the instruments, they just wrote it out. So it was just something that, and it's funny because when I was studying with Dr. Cowan, Dr. Scott Cowan, he would always ask, hey, where's your concert scores? And I never, you know, I was like, concert scores? What do you mean? Like, I need to write another score? Like, he was like, no, just take the score and put it in concert key. And I was like, well, that seems like an extra step because ultimately you're going to transpose it out for all the instruments anyway. So, you know, transpose it out. And so he was like, wait a minute, do you write transposing for the, I was like, yeah, of course. That's how I've always done it. He was like, nah, man, like that's not really the process. I'm like, I just thought that folks, he was like, no, like most people write a concert score and then they go through, or the copyists will go through and transpose for the instruments. And I'm like, he was like, why do you think that a lot of times with scores there, you know, transpose scores, there's always the condensed score because, you know, like, or there's a concert score or a condensed score. And it's like, so it can all be in concert so you can just see what's going on and you have to worry about transposing for like E flat clarinet. And I was like, no, just, why don't you just learn the range of E flat clarinet? Because we had to learn that anyway. That's the thing. I was like, you teach this in the method that we use for jazz arranging is to know all the ranges of all the instruments and to know where they sit actually on the instrument. So that middle C is the A on the E flat baritone saxophone. You know, so we know this stuff, and so I just assumed that you just transpose the, you know. So I was actually skipping a lot of steps. I just always assumed that that's kind of the way the cats did it, and so it's the same thing with perfect pitch. I was just like, I just figured like everybody could do that, and then he was like, no, that's called perfect pitch, and he was like, I'll play something again, and I'll play a succession of notes, and I was just like, tell him what the succession of notes were, and then he'll play them faster, see if I can pick them out. I pick them out, and he was like, "Dude, like you really should like write a lot of music." And I was like, well, I'm trying to do that now. It's just a slow, tedious process. And I told him that I'm getting faster at it, but it's one of those things that I think it's going to take a while to get quick with things. And so now, like when I write things out and I'm doing arrangements and stuff like that, it doesn't really take me a lot of time. I mean, I do see it as quite a blessing, especially as a composer, because it helps me with output, and I don't have to think about. I could think a little more creative about things, and so that's one of the things that I really appreciate about because the things I hear in my head, I already know what they are. I don't have to think about, okay, the strategy and the process of how am I actually going to put this in.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I interviewed Dave Powers, Bobby Floyd, which both have perfect pitch. And in those interviews,
I didn't know Bobby Floyd had perfect pitch. I suspected that Dave did because of his ears. I'm just like, oh, this dude hears everything. But
Yeah.
I didn't realize that Bobby Floyd, but that makes sense though. That totally makes sense
Yeah. And I also Joy DeFrancesco, he's also has perfect pitch. And I
I
was
didn't know that, but it makes sense too, especially with all the stuff he plays.
yeah, but but the questions I was
Yeah, I
asking
thought you
them,
did too.
no, I don't have perfect pitch. Now, what's interesting is I have found, and I've had students that had perfect pitch,
Hmm.
but I have found that sometimes perfect pitch can actually be a hindrance
It can
be,
be. Yeah, yeah.
because I mean you alluded to skipping certain steps,
Hmm.
and because when you're going to learn to teach someone and they don't have perfect pitch,
Right.
they're going to need those steps in their process. So
Yep.
I found that sometimes it can be a hindrance that way. And
Hmm.
then also, I think so. What I'm capable of doing is with the instruments that I play,
Hmm.
especially saxophone, flute, clarinet. I know every note that's happening. Like I can hear every note. I don't need a frame of reference, but I'm not doing it based on what the pitch is. I know what the fingering is. Like I'm not doing it based on.
That's
It is based on the pitch, but it,
true.
I know what notes being fingered. So, for
Hmm.
instance, if if someone's playing saxophone and they're a quarter tone sharp, it
Hmm.
doesn't matter because I know what
Right.
note that they're fingering. It's because I can hear the timbre. I can hear the timbre
Right.
differences in the notes because
Hmm.
the instruments are not consistent.
Right.
Some notes sound more open, some are more muffled, some are a little sharp, some are a little flat in relationship. The air is coming out of different places, and is
Right.
acoustically hits the room in a different way, and
Hmm.
I can hear all of that. And I
That's
think that
interesting.
that's
That's that performance practice stuff that we talked about. And you alluded to something that I actually when you mentioned like teaching those steps, so I had to go back and learn that stuff.
yeah.
And I had to learn like exactly what you're talking about. I always think that that's so amazing that cats like yourself who don't have perfect pitch but play at the level that you do on all these different instruments. Because for me, the one hindrance I have when I pick up a C trumpet, I literally have to learn that act all over again. I have to learn that. I have to learn the fingerings all over again because I'm expecting C to be B flat. So I'm thinking like C, so B flat on the C trumpet is C on the B flat trumpet that I normally play. But when I'm playing a C on C trumpet, well, that's D on the B flat trumpet. And so I have to, it's like a painstaking process. Now, after a few days or maybe a few weeks of doing this, if I'm really diligent about this, then I'm fine. But then when I go back to B flat trumpet, I have to learn B flat trumpet fingerings and pitch matching all over again. And so this is something that I constantly struggle with. But I find people with good relative pitch, they are they just kill it, man. They can go pick up an E flat trumpet and it's like flawless. C trumpet, flawless. D trumpet, flawless. Back to B flat, flawless. To me, it's D flat, killing. C trumpet, oh shit.
Yeah,
So then it turns
yeah,
into
yeah, yeah. You know, I
excuse me.
asked,
But yeah, it
and no,
turns
it's
into
okay.
that,
I asked, yeah, I asked Bobby about,
Uh-huh.
about the whole detuning the piano thing, and I
Hmm.
asked him, so if I detune the piano, how, what would that go like? And he's like, yeah, I don't want to play on a detuned piano, you know. There's a real it's like an absolute location. It's like perfect pitch is like GPS coordinates. It's like having the coordinates, you know, with you all the time and just knowing what the coordinates are.
Yeah.
But if if you want to move in some kind of abstract location that disregards the coordinates, maybe the coordinates seem like they're actually baggage,
Yeah,
trying to
it's
get to the
just a
next
little
location.
struggle. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You know,
now,
in the area,
no,
well, you know, it's funny because like in the area of like writing and just kind of like arranging and orchestration, that stuff doesn't bother me at all. So like
hmm,
like so going back to my performance practice course, there out of a class of 14 of us, there were 4 of us that have perfect pitch.
hmm,
One of the young ladies, she's a great pianist, and I think she is from, I want to say Beijing, but she comes from a school of pianists from this area in China where they're all great piano players. A lot of them have perfect pitch. And when we were doing a section, we had one of our professors come in to do a section on Baroque flute playing and just woodwind playing in general. The tuning aspects of the Baroque flutes and clarinets was very interesting because sometimes instead of tuning to A440 or 442, they'd be tuned to like A414 or 415. So
hmm.
it's really flat. It almost sounds like A flat. And so we'll be listening to a sonata in B. And that joker sounds like B flat the whole time. And so the girl was like, no, that's not B. That is B flat. That she could not deal with the fact that no, it really is. It really was messing with her, and I was like, now for
Uh,
me, because I've had like, you know, because I'm a little older than her. She's like in her early 30s, so I got like at least 10 to almost 15 years on her. So I know this song and dance now because I've been there, and it's just like, yeah. So I remember I likened it to, you ever listen to an old record? You
mhm.
know it's in B flat. In fact, you could feel it's in B flat, but it sounds like it's in B or it sounds like it's in A. And it's like, well, this is sort of the same thing. And it's funny because Dr. John Bailey's master flute player, he was like, exactly. This is exactly what happens because you have to remember when you're traveling as a Baroque musician, the orchestra may be tuned differently from city to city. So, you know, it ain't going to be A440 all the time. Sometimes it's A420. Sometimes it's A415, sometimes it's A410. You know, you just never know what you're going to get. So you have to be ready for that. And so that adaptation piece with your ears is something that you have to pick up. Or he was like, what if you start playing like more world music? You start getting into like some of the Indian music, and some of that stuff
Right,
just,
right, right,
oh
right,
my
right.
God. Yeah, you gotta you gotta get in where you fit in at that point, and you gotta really use your ears. And so being locked on A440, it's just not going to do you a lot of good sometimes. And so I had to kind of learn that, but I learned that by way of writing and listening to a lot of composers over time. And so eventually you start to pick up on like, oh, okay, I see what's happening now.
You know, I also interviewed Rick Beato, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, he's the one with the neural app, which is what he was a playlist that he developed to basically teach his son when he was in the formative years, where
Right,
your
right.
brain is soft enough basically to accommodate perfect pitch, and he taught his son perfect pitch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Um, yeah,
I talked to him, and of course Rick doesn't have perfect pitch, but his son
yeah,
does, right?
yeah.
And so that was a really interesting conversation. Something that I want to do eventually is I want to have some kind of a forum or a panel, a discussion where I have a few people that have perfect pitch, a few
Mm-hmm.
people that don't, and just to have a kind of an open kind of conversation. There'll be some kind of a presentation, some scholarly presentation, and then it'll just be kind of like just kind of talking different perspectives on perception of pitch. It's a fascinating topic. Now, something
Yeah.
that you were talking about as far as being able to hear everything in your head and just being able to write it down. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the thing is that I can do that. I
Mm-hmm.
might not be right about what the notes are. I mean,
Sure, sure, sure.
I'll
Yeah,
be right. I'll be right as far as how they relate to each other. but I could be a whole step away, a half step away, a minor third away from where I think an F is or something, you know. And I can just write in as if that is the key, and then when I discover that it's not, I can press a button then. Or, well, if you have the computer, then hopefully you're going to know what an F is, so that wouldn't be an issue. But yeah. So, one thing that was interesting in our conversations about Perfect Pitch is you have actually gone back and developed some of the connecting tissue and done some of the things that folks that don't have perfect pitch would have had to do to be able to acquire, you know, quick access to, you know, hearing certain intervals and things. You actually went back and did some of those steps, or a lot of those steps, filled those in. Whereas what I have found is, you know, a high percentage of people that have perfect pitch, they don't do that. They don't ever go back and say, okay, what's the math on this? You know, you know, how does this actually work? Because, you know, if you can hear the notes, what's the point, you know, in figuring out how you can hear the notes? I mean, I just know what the note is, you know, why does it matter?
There's that, so with that, there's that, so, you know, my wife and I talk to her about a lot of this stuff all the time. And one of those things has to do with having you know, getting your approach to certain things to be more disciplined. And so that's one of the reasons why I've gone back and had to learn a lot of those sort of connecting tissue type things to really bring certain things full circle, as opposed to I'm just writing what I hear, but really start to put together like some systems in place that are really going to not only make me efficient as a player and writer, but also make me be able to express some things even more and more in depth, and also just to be able to, I think it helps your vocabulary. I think it helps to expand your vocabulary a little more. The more you're able to go back and hone in on some of those missing steps that you were able to skip over all the way. One of the things that, you know, Barry Harris does a lot of talk on this. And one of the things I really have grown to appreciate and listening to, watching a lot of his videos on things like the 6 diminished scale and what is a diminished scale and things like that, is to go back and start to think a little more. It just helps me to think a little more full circle. And when I'm thinking, I think a lot of that, I had a friend of mine, you know what, this makes me think about a buddy of mine in the DC area, one very talented keyboard player and trumpet player. His name is DeAndre Schaefer. And one of the things we got to talking about this, and he was like, you know what, what you're doing now is you're really starting to get a lot of vocabulary together as it pertains to harmony, and as it pertains to harmony as a real like expression vehicle for the music. And so you're trying to dive into some real connecting things that are going to really solidify your harmonic foundation and make it super solid. And so a lot of things won't really, even in your own writing, he was saying things won't go past you without you really knowing it. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be spontaneous or you know, and creative and things like that. But what it does is it really, I think it helps to amp up some of the creativity in that sense. And so I really feel like being able to go back on these things and really learn some things about like just really looking at scales and their functions and things, as opposed to just thinking superficially about scales and scratching the surface, to really dive into some things and just really like, oh, this is another sort of thought process about how to use this particular tool. So it's just like sharpening all the tools and really using it now.
You know, one thing that we've talked a lot about is discipline. We've talked a lot about discipline.
Yeah.
I think discipline is one of the things that attracted both of us to the Orthodox Church. I think discipline is something that attracted us to to jazz, to composing and arranging and exploring different aspects of the music industry, different things that we were interested in, and really pursuing those to their logical end, not just dipping the toe in it and
Right.
testing on a surface level, but really digging deep. And that's something that I admire about you. You know, I know what it is to be, a 40-year-old graduate student. I know what that is, and
Yep.
I know,
Mhm.
I get that, but it's like, you, it's just something compels you and drives you to say, hey, there's something more, and
Right.
let's get after it. I mean, you don't. I mean, you don't know that none of us know how long we're going to be here. We
Right.
don't know what kind of opportunities are going to be in front of us. We don't know any of that.
Right.
I see music in everything in my life, and I know you see it the same way, all
Mhm.
as an act of worship. All
Sure.
as an act
Yeah.
of worship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not just about, it's not just what we do at church. It's not just faithfully attending church services and at least behaving during the church service. It's hopefully extends to far beyond that, and causes us to approach everything that it is that we do, everything that we love, with that same kind of zeal, that same kind of passion, that same kind of purpose. Can you talk a little bit about what music has meant to you, and how it's helped you, to deal with hard times, to and though things don't happen the way we think they're going to happen, or in the
Mhm.
order that we think they would happen, why music has continued to keep calling you, and why do you keep answering when it calls you?
Yeah. Gosh, man, I've actually, you know, in terms of the why, I don't know so much why I keep coming back to it. You know, because I've tried to get away from music before, and just kind of throw in the towel, and it's funny because every time I end up thinking about doing that, then I'll end up sort of figuring something out that was right in front of my face the whole time, and I'll discover something that was always there. It's just funny how that works. For me, sort of growing up the way that I did, again, at this point, at this stage of my life, at my age, I try not to dwell too much on the way that I grew up. But it's just something that was always present. And even if I decided to pursue it as a profession, as an artist, from an artistic standpoint, I still feel that music would have been something that was always there and always important, even if I didn't realize the potential that I had as a musician. I, I don't know. There's just something about music being that sort of vehicle and conduit that you can't really see or touch, but it's present. You know that can it just you know I don't know. Like people always talk about like sometimes the language of holy things is through music, and it's I I think that there's something really divine there that I think that is just I think that has always been there. Um, and I just think that I think that the way that we tap into it, in the way that it ends up coming into our lives, for me it's just something that I just think has always been there. And then as I've reached certain areas of despair in my life, it was something that I just turned to, and it was, oh, you're here, this is okay, I guess I'll deal with this then for a while. And but to be able to notice that, but also know where it comes from, because sometimes I do feel that music, there is the lure of, and it's a very how do you say, a very tempting lure to just get into music as for what it can offer you in terms of all the, I guess, the accolades, and even if you're able to become famous as a musician and things like that, there's the lure of that, or the seductive lure of that. And then you have also the seductive lure of being able to use music in sort of not the most positive ways. And so there is that we have to be careful of. But I think that because I'm constantly asking for ways that I can express really pretty and beautiful things. Like, for one of the things that I've always, because and this is where I think style is very important. This is one of the reasons why certain types of music I just never dealt with, just because it didn't really sound that beautiful to me. Now that doesn't mean that it has to be all pretty major stuff or all pretty minor stuff, and nothing like that. But what I'm saying is that just like the shape of in the body of a particular work, it all comes into play, and it communicates something, it tells a certain type of story. And this is something that I'm starting to really try to pay attention as I try to mature more and more in this art form, in terms of telling a certain story. But I think that for me, it's always because I've seen so much negative, and I've seen so much evil for what it's worth. Um, uh, one of the things I love about people like you and my wife, who know their fathers, and have great experience and relationships with their fathers. I never knew my father, and I never knew my father that well, and I know of him, but my father was never involved in my life. So you take that, all of these just really downtrodden characters around my mom, as just dealing with her, 20 something years of drugs and alcoholism, and all the negative things around her. And there's still some things. I'm always looking for beauty, because it's easy to see all the ugliness and all the dirt and things like that around. So because of that, I when it comes to music, I'm always looking for that type of beauty, whether it's through struggle, or even if it's not any struggle, but it's just beautiful when you hear it. I'm always looking for that, and so I think that's one of the things that's always kind of kept me going. And I think that looking for that beauty in music, in all types of music that I listen to or deal with or compose and write myself, because I'm looking for that, I think ultimately I'm constantly trying to find the divine in that space, whatever that space may be, whether it's a 30-minute work, 10-minute work, 1 minute work, 30-second work. Just, I'm always kind of looking for that. Just, and it's always the pretty sounds. And it's funny because Barry Harris talks a lot about this. I've been really, really digging Barry Harris a lot for the last maybe 2, 3 years. Right before I came to school here. And he's always asking, I want to hear some simple, pretty,
Ah,
exposé.
right, 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 right,
And
right.
he's always asking for that. And I'm just like, and that I find that to be so endearing. Just people, when they want to hear just really beautifully sounding things. I just get such joy, even if it's like music that shows signs of struggle, and then out of that struggle, and it's just so glorious. I remember the San Francisco Symphony came here, I think last year, and did a concert, and they did what was the piece? Was it Sibelius Fourth? I think it was Sibelius Fourth. And that big victorious ending, after all this stuff that's happening, all this struggle, and just all these parts coming together, and you just get to this big, like victorious. And I've just always loved stuff like that. It's one of the reasons why I'm always attracted to film music,
Mm.
especially like epic film music of like superhero stories and things like that.
Yeah. No.
I'm always attracted to that stuff because it's just, you know, I remember we had a conversation about Superman one time, and you was like, man, it's just something about Superman. I was during the time Superman Returns came out. Superman Returns came out, and that was actually I thought it was a good story. Maybe not shot the best, but it was a good story, and of course he had baby mama drama going on, and that one, and that was kind of funny. It was kind of endearing too, but it was kind of funny to kind of see that. But just something about, you know, about that character. But man, when Christopher Nolan did Man of Steel, you know, Hans Zimmer, I think that's probably, I like Hans Zimmer work a lot. I think that he is a very expressive composer, and it's funny because he claims to not read music at all, but he seems to get a lot of emotion out of his music. And but the stuff he put together for Man of Steel, I think that's in terms of simplistic, but yet still very high level writing. I just can't find any fault with that score. I think
that score is killing. Yeah, so Man of Steel.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that movie is haunting.
Yeah.
You know, it just has that thing throughout the whole movie, man. Oh, it's killing.
So good, man. I mean, and you know, it's funny because like so I have a few movies that I wish I saw in the theater, and that came out in 2013, and I remember hearing about it, but I didn't watch it in the theater. I was like, man, I missed this. I couldn't believe I missed this one. I
saw, you know, critics always like to, you know, they wouldn't have a job if they couldn't find things that's not worth criticizing, that, you know, that it was perfect. You know, they still find a way, you know, to criticize. And they was talking about, you know, Man of Steel, and they was, you know, and stuff like that. I was like, dude, I mean, what faults can you have with this movie? It's just, it is such a great movie.
If the critics were more like CinemaSins, I could deal with that, because I you know, if you ever get a chance to check out CinemaSins, that's a great little platform on YouTube. So what they do is they produce these videos, everything wrong with da 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 da. So it's like everything wrong with the Justice League, or everything wrong.
Okay, right.
So, and they'll go through, and it's hilarious. I mean, the videos are so hilarious, and it's so funny. But and so what they do is they go through and they find all the script errors or storyline or continuity issues and things like that. And it's like good stuff, but it's humorous too. It's just like it's comedy, and so they don't take themselves too serious. And some of the stuff you can argue like, yeah, okay, you're just, and he'll just say, yeah, I'm just being a douche right now, and I'm nitpicking, so I'll take a spin off of that. Or, you know what, screw it. I feel like being a douche, so I'm going to give them 30 more spins. You know, so that's
right.
It's hilarious. And, you know, even as good as like the first act and second act of the Avengers between Infinity War and Endgame, I mean, both of those movies got something like 120 spins or something like that. So it was just like, you could find all kinds of, especially productions so big, you can find all kinds of issues with them. But I do get the sense that they still feel, especially for the great movies, that these were great movies. They did Jordan Peele's movies, Us and Get Out. I struggle getting through Us. In fact, I still haven't finished that one yet, but Get Out was really good, and they made it a point, you know, they made it a point to say all the really good things about Get Out, and then of course there were some other things that were like, but yeah, so, with Man of Steel,
I did want to mention I did want to mention a couple things. I mean, we could talk for like 5 hours. I mean, easy, you know, and we've done that on several occasions, much to the chagrin of my wife. But there's two things I wanted to mention. One. And this is not just because you're my best friend and all of that, but you have one of the most talented pens as far as
Oh, thanks.
composing. The stuff that you write, the stuff that you arrange is incredible. And we got to collaborate on a recent project called How
Oh,
Sweet the
yeah.
Sound,
Uh-huh.
where, I've been uh, uh, writing a gospel setting of an Orthodox Vespers,
Mhm.
and you contributed for the arrangements. We discussed uh, what hymns that you were going to sort of conflate with the in which section of the lyrics, and you just hit that stuff out the park. That was really well done, and I know something that was close to home for you, and I knew that you would enjoy doing it, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
was glad
Yeah.
that we could collaborate on that. And then the
No,
other thing, oh,
that was really a blessing to be a part of that. That was great, man. It was
well,
really, really good.
there's more to come because
Oh, yeah.
it's taken on a
I'm looking
life of
forward
its
to it.
own. I
Yeah.
was interviewed by what is it? What is it? Orthodoxy Live
Oh, yeah.
today, or yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah. I did get a chance to check out. In fact, that was the live interview for one
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
podcast on that. Yeah.
yeah, and that's sparked a lot of interest around the country. But then also we had been meeting. I mean, we got it was such a tremendous like. I mean, we had more than 300 people there for the How
Yeah.
Sweet the Sound event, and then 500 people were watching the live stream. And then thousands and thousands people have watched from 46 states and dozens of
Wow.
countries around the world.
Oh my gosh,
Been
man.
quite
Oh man.
it's been a
Hey
quite
man.
incredible, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's been a quite incredible thing, and especially to consider the kind of niche, that
Mhm.
is.
The
I
heck
mean,
of a niche.
you and I, you and I both know that
Mhm.
the tendency, the default, is that you have the greatest musicians, the greatest composers, playing the baddest concert in a great venue, and
Mhm.
five people show up.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
like the default. That's what,
Yeah.
it's like a cliche
Mhm.
that it's been
Mhm.
played out so many times.
Mhm.
And but for this, it was just so well received, and
Yeah.
everybody loved your contribution. And like I
Um,
said, we'll be talking more about that.
oh
The
yeah.
other thing, the
That
other,
was awesome. And you know what's good? What was great about that project? So, um, so for my own like recitals here, uh, you know, each 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 recital sort of leading up to my dissertation piece that I'm currently working on. And it's funny because that particular project was right in line with what was supposed to be on recital for this spring, which was an art song project.
mm,
And it was funny because like all it's really funny because the first project for last year was I wanted to write another string quartet, and so that was going to be but that was going to lead up to when I'm using strings for the dissertation piece, and so I was able to do that. And then this year was going to be an art song, but I was like, you know what? Because the dissertation piece is going to be an Orthodox subject matter, I'm going to do one, but via art song. So what I ended up doing was the life of Saint Mary of Egypt. And so
mm.
this just like ran right into that project. So it was literally like basically um, sort of sketching a lot of the vibe and sort of the concept. So it was like when you were putting this together, I was like, oh my God, I'm literally doing I'm this is like getting me prepared for my recital stuff, right? Like it's falling right in line. That's really funny how that stuff works. I think it's providence when things like that work out like that, and and I even dare say divine providence because it just ran right into what I was getting ready for. And it's funny because by the time I got done with that and went right into my the last two movements of my art song project, they just came right out. They just filled right out. and it was just like, okay, this is the vibe that, because sometimes even though like the perfect pitch thing, you got perfect pitch, but sometimes you can hear things in your head, but it may not be as clear. So I have to wait for that clarity to really come forward. And then once that clarity comes forward, then it's like, then you just dump it right into the program and on the paper. And so,
Right.
but with this, it was like, I wasn't sure how I wanted the last two movements to go. But I knew I wanted a fast movement, and that ended up being the second movement. But the third movement, so there was a couple things that needed to happen. One was, so I had this performance practice class, and we got to listen to a lot of music from a particular period that I just hadn't really been listening to a lot of. I mean, I listened to it, but not a lot in depth from that period. And then right around that time, the How Sweet the Sound project started, like the wheels started really turning over, and this is okay. Now we're gonna jump into this and get this going. And then from there was like, oh man, now I got to finish up my art songs for for my recital, and the deadline's kind of approaching. So it just all like ran right into each other, and so those last two movements they just filled right out, and it was great. I was just like, wow, this really, yeah, that actually helped me get my scholastic work done.
Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is we have this alternative modes thing that we're going to do, and that's coming up. What is that? I think this coming Monday that
Right.
we're going to record that, and that's going to be the first one of these conversations with Dr. Thunder that we're doing, where it's not going to just be two people. It's going to be like a panel of folks, and we're going to discuss some alternative modes, some different different modes of thought, and I think that's going to be interesting, especially given a lot of what's going on in the country right now. But yeah, so I'm going to get to see you again on Monday,
Yeah.
and so folks, if you're enjoying this conversation, we're going to, the mode will be changed, but it'll be the same tune. So anyhow, well, is there anything that you a final word that you have, something that you want to say, or something that you want to plug, maybe?
So I guess so a few things that I could in terms of encouragement to you and your family, myself and my family, as well as my family that's living in in other states and things like that. I just encourage everybody to just kind of to hang in there, stay safe, um, pray. If you're into that. Definitely keep prayer and keep it as a focal point, because one of the things I've noticed too lately is that people will talk about, well, what can we do, and someone will be like, well, you can pray, and it's just like, yeah, but what can we do? And a lot of times I think people don't. I think people sort of undercut prayer and underscore prayer as if it's not something that's a very viable for change and making things better, but it really is. And even if it's not to just make things better in a superficial sense, but to gain clarity and insight on a lot of things, I think that it can be a positive a thing to really help us get through some of the trying things that we see, especially on the artistic front, because a lot of people are just not as busy right now, or they have to do virtual things instead of things face to face and having that face to face connection and interaction. And I understand that gets old real fast. I get it, and I think that I just think that being able to have that meditative and contemplative clarity that I think is necessary right now. I think that a lot of folks will find that we'll just be better for it in the end. In terms of plugging things, it's funny because I always think I'm not that busy, but constantly doing things and constantly learning things musically. And so lately I've been really plugging away at trying to get to know my software better. And so I have I have a couple of singles I'm going to release very soon. One is a love song inspired by my own wife, of course. And I've been thinking about who I can get to sing it for the longest time. I really wish I could sing, but I just can't sing well enough to pull this thing off. So I've actually found someone that I think is going to work
It
out
would be
really
in
well.
tune, though. Maybe you don't
Right.
sing very well, but it would be in tune.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Exactly. I just can't blow like, like folks say they can really blow, and for this, I just kind of need that, like a person to blow. So I'm actually kind of excited about that. And and I have a few other things too. Of course, so next year I have to do 2 recitals because I didn't get to do, my recital this year. So the art song, which is based on the Great Canada St. Andrew Creek, the story of St. Mary of Egypt. That'll be coming in the fall. So I'll keep everybody closely posted with that. That's the Apolatikion. It's called Apolatikion St. Mary of Egypt.
Now, are you gonna when you're doing things and you're posting information about things? I mean, do you post stuff to your website?
I do. But I've been getting a little more response via Facebook. So
Okay.
I'm going to do both, and so I'll do website and website. I'll always have the link to the website, but also be able to sort of post things via Facebook, and hopefully for the actual recitals themselves, I'll try to
You'll
post
live
those
stream
live.
them.
I'll do a
Yeah.
live stream for those,
Yeah.
and then go from there. And with the single, I'll probably talk with you actually personally about some ways to sort of advertise this, because I really want to. This is one song I definitely want to follow through on as a songwriter and as a composer, and so I'm gonna do some lead ups to the actual release of the
Okay. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Well, well, God bless you, and tell
you
Laura
too.
I said hey. Of course,
Will do.
I actually just messaged her before we started, so
Oh, wow.
but
Way back.
yeah, right. So yeah, say hey from me, and
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing you on Monday.
We said give Lori our love, and
Yep.
little Moses our love. He's getting so big,
Definitely will.
man. He's getting tall, man. I was like, oh my
Yes, he
gosh,
is.
man. Yeah, this young man's growing.
Yeah, that boy is into everything.
Yeah. Yeah,
All
man.
right, man. I definitely
God
will
bless you
tell.
too, man.
I'll definitely tell Lori and Moses you said hey.
Yes, sir.
All
All
right.
righty. All right.
Well,
Thanks
God
a lot
bless you.
again, man. Great seeing you. God bless you, brother.
All right, now.
Yes, sir. All right.
Bye-bye.
Now.